And here we are. I think this is episode 5.
Yes, it's episode 5.
Yeah. So, yeah, we were talking earlier about different items we could talk about. There's a few different things. I don't know. Vernon, do you have anything in terms of current events that you think is worth talking about?
Current events, huh? Well, the one glaring thing in my mind is the very creepy Joe Biden screenshot.
I'm not sure I saw that. So,
are you sure
more about it?
it's the one where he's in this red backdrop, like this really uncannily fascist kind of image. It's like it's been circulating around Twitter and everything. It's like are you this stupid to let this happen, kind of a thing. It's like it's a dark red kind of. I wish I had like a single version to kind of just show you, but off the top of my head, but it's this really creepy thing. What?
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I've completely missed that, actually. I'm afraid.
Okay, well, let's see if I can kind of find it here. But anyway, let's for the sake of not having silence while I do this, I thought our last episode went quite well, actually. It was very well watched, and even Brother K of Bloodstained Men had kind things to say about it.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yes, so yeah, we did talk about a few different items before. I'm sort of probably not. Generally, I obviously keep up with current affairs, but my focus is a lot often history and various other aspects that I'm looking at. When something's really big in terms of say feminism and current affairs, I'll be on to that. But I've got we've thrown around a few other items too, so I don't know if we can start talking about those while you're looking for that image.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. I think the first thing you just threw right out is the gender transition movement.
Yes. Great. Yeah. So the gender transition movement. Yeah. So this is just an article that we've recently added to Wiki4Men. I'm just going to bring it up. So I think this really started with Warren Farrell. So for those who don't know, Warren Farrell, actually, I think we probably have mentioned him on previous episodes, but he actually was a board member of the National Organization for Women. So I think he's, from memory, the only male board member to have ever been re-elected to the board, I think. So there were a number of male board members for the National Organization for Women. And Warren did, in fact, call himself a feminist in the past, but going back a few decades. But listening to him talk about it, he was really on board with the National Organization for Women when they were addressing very specific issues that were facing women in the 1960s and so forth. But he felt that eventually many of those issues were addressed, and there was I think if I could sort of editorialize that, I think he was seeing a bit of scope creep. And the National Organization for Women was starting to look for more and more things to be aggrieved about, which, of course, in hindsight, we now see is really the start of what we have now, where we have the feminist movement that's always looking for new and different ways to be aggrieved, because any problems that women might have had, say, decades ago, have been long addressed in the West. But they've got to keep finding new issues. Anyway, Warren, and not just Warren, there's a lady whose name escapes me at the moment. She's a friend of Warren's, and Warren has credited her. She was an actual member of the National Organization for Women. He has credited her too with standing up against this push towards aggrieved entitlement. But he also stood up against it, and of course, in the end, he was no longer a board member of National Organization for Women. And as he said in the Red Pill documentary, when he was advocating for women's issues, he was, he had well-paid speaking engagements and so forth. But when you start talking about men's issues, it's a very different picture. And he said the well-paid speaking engagements all dried up. So, but anyway, getting to the gender transition movement, this is something that Warren has been advocating. And I think the argument that's been put forward here is that He's essentially saying that eventually, he would say post men's rights movement, it would eventually evolve into a sort of gender transition movement in which the gender roles of the past are largely behind us, and people are free to be, take on what sort of a role without prejudice in society that they want. Kind of the thing that many Western people would say that it's what they want, and even many feminists would claim it's what they're aiming for. But the evidence demonstrates that feminism is doing anything but. I think Warren's hopeful that in the future that we'll eventually get there.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I found the image, by the way, like the best one I could find off of Google, because there's a lot of old like versions on Twitter and everything like that, but this is as straightforward as I can find it.
Oh, you've posted that. Okay, good. Thank you. Yes.
It's something completely, probably done by accident, but it's like what were they thinking with this creepy red lighting? Yeah, but anyway, it's I see Sydney Watson's got Hitler, Stalin, and Mao, comparing it with this one. So
really,
yeah, that's yeah.
Okay. Yes. That's an interesting photo, actually. I'd like that. It could come from certain movies, couldn't it? I see what you mean. I don't often use the word creepy because it's often used negatively against men. But I have to say that's probably one of the few cases where I'd legitimately say it's the right term.
Right. It's state creepy. It's surveillance creepy. It's tyrannical maniac creepy.
Yes, well, we're sure to put a link to that, huh? So yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes. So I don't know. Did you had another one on your list there? Otherwise, I've got a couple of items to talk about.
Well, actually, I kind of wanted to go ahead and comment on what you actually just talked. We were kind of
yes,
sort of
please do.
Having our minds in separate places, but you were talking about the gender transition movement. So
that's right.
In modern times, it sounds kind of like a completely different context, doesn't it? But and I think Warren gets a bit of flack for promoting something that's more close to a traditionalist sometimes. But read this sentiment, and it's kind of this idea of challenging those gender roles, and I think that's not the fairest of things to say. I think Warren's got his heart in the right place here.
Yes, I agree.
I think,
absolutely. Yes. Yep. So another one I was going to mention is the end of men. And now there's a few things that probably aren't very well known now, and I think after a few years they tend to get forgotten, and it's probably worth bringing up. I mean, what Warren was talking about is actually a great example of that, because this is going back several decades, some of the stuff he's been talking about. But a woman by the name of Hannah Rosen wrote a book. She originally wrote an article, actually, and then later on turned into a book called The End of Men. And I wanted to mention that because I think we should keep these things in people's minds. So she wrote an article, it was probably about 2010 or so, I think the article was. And it was basically, it actually talked about many of the issues that we talk about. So she was actually right in that she's raising many of the problems with education and so forth. We know a little bit more about it actually now, but raising problems with their education of boys going right through from early years, with being about a year behind girls reading in the younger years and so forth, right through to university, although that's a bit more perhaps a little bit more complex of a topic. But then she proceeds to blame men for these
Mm.
problems and basically suggests there's something sort of wrong with men.
Right. It's always the patriarchy, isn't it?
Exactly.
The eternal scapegoat.
That's exactly right. Seems, yeah. I think in her case, she perhaps talk more about seeing something wrong with sort of men on an individual level rather than a state level. But I guess it's or an organisational level. But yeah, it's along the same line, isn't it? Absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yep. As you say, it always comes back to men. So anyway, so as I said, it was originally an article in the Atlantic, then later on a book, and there was also what's called a monk debate. I don't know if you've ever come across the monk debates.
I'm well aware of monk debates. So.
Oh, great. Excellent. Great. So, yeah, so there are a series of debates in North America. When I lived in North America, actually, I used to watch them earlier on. Anyway, they had one. In fact, I stopped watching them, actually, because of this one. Okay. They had a debate called Men Are Obsolete.
Right.
Right. So they had 4 women on the panel, of course. You wouldn't bother putting any men on the panel.
Right.
The affirmative team was comprised of Hannah Rosen from the aforementioned book and Maureen Dowd. And the negative team was Caitlin Moran and Camille Paglia, of course,
right.
Many of us know of. So,
and it was my understanding that Caitlin Moran wasn't much help.
Yes, I think you're probably right, actually. It's been a few years since I watched the actual debate, but yeah, I think you're probably right. Camille Paglia was really, she was obviously I'd say the star of the show. Mm-hmm. She was fielding parrying the statements from the other team quite well. But I think you're probably right, actually, from memory.
Right. I just didn't get the impression that Caitlin Moran really cared. She could have been on the other side for all.
So poor old Camille was left to fight their battle herself. Yeah,
right.
So afterwards, more than 50% voted in favour of the motion for the pro side, saying and the motion was carried. The motion was men are obsolete. So the idea is there that more than 50% of the audience felt that the pro team, the affirmative team, carried the argument. I would say that's not at all true. I'd say Camille Paglia absolutely nailed them to the wall. But anyway, that's what it is. I remember, I don't know where I read it, but somebody who was present, I think it might have been a journalist or something who was present at this particular monk debate in the audience, said that he got the distinct impression that many of the young men, many people had gone as a couple, there's a young man, a young woman, and that the men had voted in favour of men being obsolete. We got the impression to keep their girlfriends happy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It always seems to be the case, isn't it? It's like, what does it say about people that, in order to make women happy, the men have to be cut down all the time,
Exactly.
Right.
And it's terribly patronizing too. So the men who are doing that are patronizing the women. They're saying that the women can't handle the truth or can't handle any sort of confronts their views.
Right.
And they have to keep the little woman happy.
Exactly. And what's more, the very question, are men obsolete, is in itself patronizing,
Yes.
Because that relegates men to use only and not value objects.
That's a good point, actually. You're right. It really does speak to the idea of men, of the utility value of men, exactly, which, of course, comes back to Warren Farrell, where he said, no, actually, I think actually Warren didn't originally say this, but he has used it a number of times.
Sure.
Men are human doings and women are human beings.
Yeah. He says that quite a bit. I concur with you. I don't know if he originated that at all, but it is something that's kind of signature to him at this point, right?
Exactly. I remember I actually looked it up a few months ago and did a research on it. I think I did find an example of other people having said it previously. But yes, I think there's certainly Warren is the one who popularized it.
Right. I would almost continue to add to this is that I'll actually expand the saying and saying that women are human beings and men are human dyings. Because that's one I almost prefer over doings, because they're subject to death all the time, and they're expected to die.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. In fact, this came up recently There, I just now he actually said this a little while ago, but I only became aware of it recently. But
Sure.
there was if I can find the name of the aspiring politician. I don't believe he actually made it as a politician. He was not elected, but he basically said men are expendable. Now I don't. Yeah, I don't have his name here, but he recently he actually said men are expendable.
Right. When it comes to that term, it's hard to tell whether somebody hates men when they say it, or if they're deploring the fact that they're expendable. Like when when I say that men are expendable, I'm saying that that's how society treats them, and it's not right, as opposed to screw them, they're expendable.
Yeah, sorry to clarify. This politician absolutely, Justin Waters, there's his name. This politician absolutely meant to say that it was. In fact, I'll read it to you. It's very clear what he means. So, apologies. Yes, I should have been clear on that point. So, Justin Waters said on Twitter on the 3rd of December 2021, and this is a quote: "The provision requiring women to register for the draft should also be removed. Women disproportionately are caregivers of children. Women are drafted, US families will be destabilized like never before. Men are meant to be expendable, women are not."
Yeah, I mean, he said the quiet part out loud. Yeah, exactly. Like, here's the thing.
His intent was men. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, sure. We men are inventors. We're clever enough to kind of come up with different solutions, right? So, in light of this, I'm all for creating caregiving robots, make women obsolete. How do you like that?
Yes. Now, and this, of course, leads to another point. That's a good point, actually. And it leads to another point: artificial wombs. So, artificial wombs are actually being developed at the moment. Now, my understanding is the only limitation on trying it out with humans at the moment is ethical, not technical. They have brought fetuses of various animals through the last few months and given birth, I believe, with from memory when I was researching it, with artificial wombs. Now, the question is, of course, if these become common, if this is a viable technology in the near future and this becomes common, that would see a dramatic shift in women's roles. It might be deemed much, much safer to give birth using artificial means, or to gestate using artificial means. And it starts to really raises the questions about the role of women in society.
Exactly. The women always expect to be around, to see through the replacement of things like men and such. So
yes, but I mean, depending on how far that technology goes, it could radically alter the way human reproduction works. But yes, there's a really interesting question around. I mean, we often hear, like I said before, men are obsolete. This is something that the monk debate talked about. If gestation is artificial at some point in the future, where does that leave women?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've already talked about sex bots to death, so one would think I'm obsessed a bit. Yeah. But it's true, it's like they're getting better, and at some point women are going to face the same question of expendability that men are.
Men currently do. Exactly. That's right. Yep. So did you have another one on? I think I sent a list through earlier.
You sent a list, yeah. So why don't we something completely out of left field, to be perfectly honest, the husband stitch. Okay, what is this?
So I generated a few random articles on Wiki4Men, actually.
Sure, yeah.
Site. And so for anyone wondering where that came from, this is an article I added actually probably a few months ago or a couple of years ago, something along those lines. So I had never heard of this before.
Okay.
So a lot of women, as a result of difficulty giving birth, it may be too late for a C-section. Mm-hmm. So they will anesthetize the woman, and they will enlarge the birth canal during birth, right, to save both mother and child. So then, of course, there's repair work to be done. So they've used a scalpel to cut the vagina open, and the baby comes out, and then there's repair work to be done, and they start stitching up. This is pretty common. There's this persistent rumor that the doctors, and it's always the male doctors,
right,
put an extra stitch in for the husband. So after I heard this, I kind of did some research on it, as I tend to do, and I can't find any evidence that it's true. But there seems to be. It's a bit like an urban myth, I think. But actually, the first reference I found was an article that said, "Hey, it's true," but the article didn't really say that. So,
anyway, so the headline is that it's actually true. Yeah. But the article doesn't say it's true.
Doesn't really support that. It make any supporting. Makes a few sort of wild claims and doesn't really make some supporting evidence. No.
Right. Okay. So is it the cited article? The husband stitch isn't just a horrifying childbirth myth.
It's real. Exactly. That's right.
Is that the one?
That would be the one. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So it says that the practice, but the practice is very real. But then proceeds to say, there are no scientific studies that show how many women have been affected.
Right. So you would have to do a study and look at the number of women who'd actually had this procedure performed in order to, and there would be data on that but I'm not sure any researchers have ever actually looked at it, like they're saying, looked at that, let alone then tried to investigate whether the husband stitch is real. How would you even find that? You'd have to go to because they're not going to put it down in the notes, are they? Right, so you'd have to go to the doctors and say, did you put an extra stitch in? Now I'm just going to go out on a bit of a limb and say, they're not going to say yes. So I don't think it's real, and I don't think there would be any way you would ever establish it. They have a couple of cases, a couple of anecdotes where women have reported that they were stitched a bit tight, and I don't doubt that happens occasionally.
Sure, right.
The doctor was a bit overzealous and stitched them a bit tight, and that then the correction needed to be made. But that doesn't mean they did it for the husband.
Right. Yeah. For that intent,
Exactly. Right, so I'd say it's probably more likely that the doctors made a mistake.
Yeah. Now, the article says straight off, the proof is in women's words.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. Yes.
Right. Believe the women. That's all the proof you need.
That's all the proof we need. There you go. Case proven. Proven. Case closed. There we go.
Right.
So I'm going to go out with so anyway, after I learned this, of course, it deserved an article, a short article on Wiki4Men.
Yeah.
So that's the husband stitch.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. There was one more.
You may have heard it here first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You may. Yeah, I only heard about it today, and probably Robert too. Yeah. Okay. So there's one more you sent that could be kind of extensive. It's you wanted to talk about racist public rants in Australia.
Oh yes, thank you. Yes. So this is a really good one actually, because we have had. So I would say. So first of all, now I think we've talked a little bit about this. So in some countries overseas, Australia has a bit of a reputation for racism, and I actually don't think that's, as I've said before, I actually don't think that's deserved. Probably in the past, like most places, there was certainly more racism than there is today. There's certainly people who claim there's a lot of racism in Australia. And when I lived overseas, a number of people asked me about it. Again, I don't think, but overall, Australia is a very accepting society. And is quite pluralistic and multicultural today, and I think that it would be pretty hard to be at this point to be racist against particular groups, in terms of say excluding someone from establishments or something. I mean, there was a case actually 15 or 20 years ago where an establishment actually did exclude an Aboriginal gentleman. It appeared to be on the basis of race, and they actually had people just launch a silent protest out the front of their establishment and for a number of weeks, and to give you an indication that was not something that the community found to be acceptable. But what we have had in Australia, though, is a series of what I've termed racist public rants. Now, as far as I know, the only person tracking this.
Okay.
Yep. So they've had these racist public rants. Well, what I found really interesting, I didn't start tracking them until there'd been 3 or 4 or 5 of them. And then I thought, no, really, there's got to be an article on this. So I've got to put a Wiki4Men article together. There's a couple of things that they all share. One, all of the perpetrators have been women. Okay. In one case, a man joined in, the woman's partner joined in partway through, but in all other cases, it's only been a lone woman who's done it. And the second thing that's interesting about them is they've all occurred either on public transport or in a place associated with public transport, like a train station or a bus stop. And I find that really interesting that this is where they've only in these particular instances, in situations, did they seem to occur. So the first one I've got on my list was in 25th of February 2014. And I remember this really distinctly. 2 women cast racial slurs and assaulted an elderly gentleman who was unable to see after his glasses were knocked off when he was attacked. Now, initially, there was some suggestion he may have been visually impaired. I think he was only visually impaired as a result of his glasses being knocked off. And despite the initial media reports, also too, they were racially abusive of him on the basis that they believed him to be an Aborigine, Australian Aborigine. In fact, he was not. He apparently reported later that he in fact has no Aboriginal ancestry. Sure. So, which is But anyway, so that was the first one. Then a few months later on, we had a woman by the name of Karen Bailey, whose name I've only recently found. Actually, she initially gave the name of Sue Wilkins, and that's the name. And all this is public information. It's all appears in the mass media, the mainstream media. Sue Wilkins, originally, as she called herself, it was only recently I went back and looked at it and discovered that her real name had been uncovered, Karen Bailey. And she was arrested after verbally abusing a Caucasian man and his Asian girlfriend. As well as making racist remarks to the Asian woman, Wilkins suggested the man must have a small penis to have been in a relationship with an Asian woman. And Bailey was quoted as saying, "Can't you get an Aussie girlfriend? You had to get a gook, you said, poor pathetic man. Is it really that small you can't get an Aussie girl?" So she was actually charged, I believe. Let's see what I've got in my notes here. But I don't know whether, I'm not sure that, in fact, I have to determine what the end result of that was. She was charged, but I'm not sure I've got the end result there. So, and then nothing happened until 2016. Now, feel free to jump in, Vernon.
Well, I'm looking at the apologies after the incident, and it's all apologies to the woman and not the man she insulted by
quite right.
By extension.
Very good. In fact, that's a good point. I'll go through those. So, following the incident, Bailey stated, "It's not nice what I said, what I did to that lady. It wasn't nice to say that to her because it's not nice when people say that to me, call me white trash and fatso." Okay. And the third thing she said was, "I know how it hurts and I shouldn't be saying it to other people." So, yes, there was no apology to the young man.
Sure,
despite what she said to him.
Yeah, and that is a myth, by the way, that Asians have small.
Yeah. Yes, quite ridiculous. And being on the edge of Asia, of course, Australia has, as I said, quite a multicultural society, including a fairly substantial amount of immigration from Asia in recent decades. So, absolutely extraordinary thing to happen.
It's a wartime kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Once, maybe decades ago, I might have not been surprised by that, but for it to happen in Australia today, disappointing.
Yeah, no matter what anyone calls us, Asians, we're the intact ones. Well, at least if you're not from South Korea nowadays.
Right. Good point, actually. That's right. Exactly. So as we often point out, circumcision is really only common in the United States and Middle East and parts of Africa, and as you note, unfortunately, South Korea as a result of the influence of the United States.
Right. But
as I say, otherwise,
it's more of an adult thing now, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if it's an infant thing over there. I don't know.
In South Korea, I'm not sure. Yeah, I do know that it has been on the rise, but I'm not sure. That's interesting. So you think it's more adults choosing to get the procedure done?
Either adults or at least they're not infants. I mean, I could be 100% wrong. Somebody can correct me on this one. So,
there's there's going to be, I think there's going to be a fair number of disappointed men out there if they thought it was going to be an improvement. Yes. So next one, 27th of July 2016, an elderly woman told a young Australian-born man that was recording the video, that he should go back to New Zealand, the country of his father. I think that's a really strange one, but she went on to say that all foreigners should go home, including New Zealanders, apparently. So, yes, I guess she's an equal opportunity offender there. So all foreigners, apparently. 24th of August 2016, a woman verbally abused an Asian passenger on a Sydney commuter train and then assaulted a man who tried to intervene. And we haven't got good information on all of these, on the names and so forth, unfortunately. 23rd of January 2017, an Asian woman verbally abuses a Middle Eastern woman and repeatedly calls her a terrorist, all in broken English. Yeah. So the young woman who was verbally abusing the information was verbally abusing the Middle Eastern woman was doing the entire thing in broken English. I admit to chuckling a little bit when I first heard that. Yeah. Anyway, a woman verbally abused an Asian passenger on a Sydney commuter train, 23rd of May 2017. See, public transport, on a train.
Yeah.
Yep. Then a little bit of a break until 15th of January 2019. A Muslim woman wearing a scarf was verbally abused on a Melbourne train. The name of the woman that attacked her has apparently not been released. She's described only as a 39-year-old Clayton woman, Clayton being the area that she lives in, apparently. Yeah. So they have been protecting the identity in some cases, unfortunately. But Jennifer Lee was verbally abused with racist taunts by an unknown woman. The woman was quoted as saying, and I quote, "Why don't you effing go back to China and keep your disease over there, you effing idiot," the woman said. A man accompanying the woman later joined in. Neither the woman nor the man were located by police who attended later. So and next one, 25th of March 2021, a pregnant Asian woman who prefers to remain anonymous was subjected to racist abuse from another pregnant woman while both were apparently awaiting ultrasounds. I find that one really strange. There they were, waiting for ultrasounds, and one of them has decided to verbally abuse the other. Extraordinary.
Yeah, so they're pretty vile, even though they're supposedly the most protected kind of demographic. You know, the pregnant woman, the childbearing woman. So,
exactly, that's right. Yeah. That's right. And then the reason this has come back up is because we had one recently, model and influencer that's what the mainstream media have called her. Lizzie Cow has been racially vilified by a woman during a dispute over a car park. Now, apparently, there was one car space, two cars, Lizzie and the other woman, and they were both tussling for the car space. But then it's turned racially vilifying. So that's the most recent one we've seen. So, but as you can see, as far as I know, as I said, I think I'm the only one who's tracking this. But as you can see, there's a fairly consistent set of incidents there, and I just find it really strange that they're all on or around public transport, and there it is.
Yeah, most of them anyway. I don't think we have ultrasounds on public transport.
Oh, sorry, I stand corrected. Thank you I stand corrected.
No, that's good. I do know that you meant most, but it's like it's in a public setting, though. It's like where people kind of inevitably get punched up. So right.
Yes, I will amend the article then to read most.
Yeah, yes. That's perfectly right. Yeah, so it's just public area. Like, I wonder if it's because not that I'm justifying any of this, but maybe just like being stuck with each other. A bunch of strangers, and I guess tensions mount. I suppose. Again, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to fish for reasons here.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. You've got people in close proximity to one another. It could be something like that. Yeah, people also tend to be a bit testy on public transport, perhaps too, don't they? They're not in there.
But it's funny then that it's women that are very testy, because we always advertise, women's relationships as really interconnected and very social, but these feel very anti-social. I don't think they like it as much as we think.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So it's certainly more complicated than I think the mainstream narrative would have us believe.
Yeah.
Yes. So I did want to mention that one anyway, especially with this other one, this Lizzie Cow having come up just recently. So I haven't got a date on that one because I don't know the exact date, but it was late August 2022.
Sure.
So I don't know. Did I have anything else on the list that I sent you?
You did not have anything else on the list. So if you want to just random generate some more stuff,
Exactly. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
sure. But while you do some searching there, I'm going to talk about yesterday, which I did a Dominaria United Jumpstart. That's the new Magic set, except it's a Jumpstart thing, which means you take two Jumpstart packs, put them together, and make like a 40 card deck.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And you know, I didn't win or anything like that, but you know, it was a free event. So, you had to buy the packs, but you know, it was a free play kind of an event. And I had some fun. And I ended up buying a booster set box. These are the contents of it. So these are some new cards I got, and some of them go for about 30, about 20, and $12. You know, so I thought it was a good pull. Yeah, I don't know if my audience plays enough Magic for me to get any of what I'm saying, but yeah.
As Vernon knows, I used to play Magic the Gathering rather a long time ago, and we are going to have a vintage game at some stage. And he has to do this so that so that we can play competitively with my ancient cards, because that's
right. Yeah. I've actually promised him to make decks that consist of the sets up to the ones that he has, so it'll be a fair
exactly.
Yeah, right.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. So I've come up with a couple of new ones. So the return, first do one quick one, and then I've got something that's probably got a little bit more in it. The Return to Work program was something that was launched by a state government here in Australia. It was, and I'm glad this is a great one. I'm glad we put the articles in, because I had forgotten about this, and the article helps to remind us. It was in the 2020 state budget, and they allocated 10 million Australian dollars to unemployed women. So they just allocated extra money for unemployed women, and it was part of the Return to Work program, because apparently men didn't need any extra money to return to work as a result of the pandemic.
Of course, yeah. You know, yeah. They always can fend for themselves, right? I mean, they magically. So it's one or the other. It's either they magically have all the resources to do whatever they want, or if they don't have it, we don't care. So pick one, you know, right?
Yeah, exactly. In actual fact, a considerable proportion of the wealth in most Western countries is actually held not just by women, but by women over 50. And a lot of women, of course, inherit from their male partners, and because of the first of all, the fact that men tend to be a little bit older than women on average when they get married, and the fact that men continue to have a lower life expectancy, more women inherit from men from their male partners than the other way around. And a very high proportion, and a growing proportion actually, of the wealth in all Western countries is currently being held by women over 50. And in actual fact, they've invented the term she-economy. She-economy, that's right, exactly. And it's interesting, actually, from a marketing point of view, I think it actually makes sense. Marketers have basically realized that women do most of the buying. Oh, we might have been mentioning that, actually. But women make most purchasing decisions, and this is increasingly true as they get older. Basically what the marketers are saying is that they should be focusing more on trying to sell to women. They know, for example, that different colors and different sounds and different imagery will appeal to men versus women, and the argument is that more advertising should be targeted at women, given that they're making most of the purchasing decisions. As a man who won't have that advertising targeted at me, I'm saying, go for that, because I'm actually quite happy if they don't want to target the advertising at me. But anyway, they've used the term she-economy in economics, and they're not even. It's really, this has come from marketing research. And they're not being down on men at all. And they're just quite legitimately saying the vast majority of wealth is held by women, and the women make the vast majority, but a high proportion of the wealth is made by women, and the vast majority of the purchasing decisions are made by women, and they should be focusing more on that. So anyway, that's the she-economy.
Right.
Yeah. I do have another one I wanted to mention. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the she-economy or
well, I mean, we talked about the idea of women usually having more of that, what we call purchasing power, right? But
that's right.
I wonder if MGTOW increases, that would change it all, because they'll be spending their money for themselves
Yeah.
And
It's
or are they going to be more on the conservative side and still save? Because we talk about women's spending decisions, right? But who's financing them a lot of the time?
Yeah, it's mostly men, actually.
Yeah.
So I think that the MGTOW will continue to be more conservative as buyers than probably an average woman. But I think there probably would be, it would push it back a little bit, I suspect, with those men making more purchasing decisions. But yeah, it may not be large, but I suspect there'll probably be something noticeable there. But that's an interesting point, actually. It's probably something we should look out for in the future.
Yeah.
And the next item I wanted to mention was, now the information I have is primarily on Australia here. I'd be really interested in what your thoughts are on the US and then Canada too, if you know. I can't think of anything relevant for Canada. I live in Queensland, the state of Queensland in Australia. There's a club called Tattersalls Club. It's in the capital city of Brisbane. It was a men's only club until 2019, when the membership narrowly voted to admit women. So Tattersalls was often held up as a sign of male privilege, that here's this club that only men can go to. There are actually, around Australia, there have been quite a lot of both men's and women's clubs. But what's interesting is, while many of the men's clubs are admitting women, and this will be no surprise to anyone who keeps up with men's rights, the women's clubs are not admitting men. So the women's clubs continue to be single sex. So Tattersalls Club here in Brisbane has opened since 2019, but open to women. There's an even more exclusive club in the same city called the Moreton Club that is female only and continues to be female only. And there are other ones in other cities like Sydney that are equivalent. Right. But this is something that. But anyway, I just thought, do you have anything like that in the US?
That I know of. I wish I did more research on that one. But the one thing that's immediately sticking out is the Boy Scouts.
Ah, yes. First of all, I just want to say I'm throwing this cold at Vernon. Vernon didn't know I was going to ask about this. So,
right.
But actually, good point about the Boy Scouts. So, yes, go on.
Well, they're now, they've been trying to get some girls into the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts, not the Girl Scouts, but the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Right. And, there's been not nearly as much complaints, if at all, by the same people who freak out about biological men and the women's locker rooms, women's bathrooms, and then their sports and everything like that. We've got to protect the women,
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And that's, they're so eager to come to their defense, but, so here's the thing, a bit of a rant here. If biological men are so predatory that one is dangerous, in which, if they get into like the women's bathrooms, women's locker rooms, then they will prey upon other women, then why do women want to enter men's spaces if they're all predatory?
Ooh, good argument. Yes.
Right. Like, that'd be even worse.
Wouldn't it be a threatening environment?
Right.
Yeah, it's full of predatory men. Gosh.
Right.
The last place you want to be.
Right. Exactly. Maybe I should shut my mouth, because if they get wind of this, they'll that's the basis in which they'll start. It affects the women. Oh, now we're against it.
Actually, that reminds me. I do have a comment on Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but that actually reminds me of something. Another comment I heard some years ago. Actually, was pointed out to me that if university campuses are as dangerous as feminists claim, then they are the most dangerous places on earth. They're more dangerous than the streets of Mogadishu. Okay, Western university campuses, which is an absolutely extraordinary claim. But they're claiming in some cases a third, half of women are sexually assaulted at these places. That would make them by far the most dangerous places on earth. What parents would send their daughters to somewhere that was that dangerous?
Right. Exactly.
No.
Right, yeah, but that's a bleak prospect. The colleges are going to be completely women's spaces soon enough, probably.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to mention about the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. From what I recall, a couple of years ago, the Girl Scouts were actually complaining that the Boy Scouts were siphoning off their members. So after being forced to admit girls, the Girl Scouts started complaining that they were missing out on the girls who would have joined their organisation previously. It's not like the Boy Scouts in general were wanting with the
Right.
girls. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the organisation was generally forced to, and they're still wrong. It was still the men. It was still their fault. Still the men's fault.
Oh yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah, but not to rag on the Boy Scouts so much, but I wonder if a lot of their morals kind of let that happen. Like some of their teachings. I think. I'm not the expert on the Boy Scouts or anything like that, but they speak a lot about how a male should act and stuff like that.
Right.
I think that's worth some kind of research. But the problem is, it's like it's back to the chivalry thing. It's back to that traditional conservative sort of kind of sentiment, which it's that kind of thing they allowed the feminism in the first place, right? So, I think they partially let it happen. They're partially to blame about this. It doesn't make it right, but I think that's worth considering.
Yeah, perhaps it predisposes them to. And then, of course, if they've been making chivalrous arguments, it's much more difficult for them to then turn that down if they've taken that position before. Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. Yes. So it's interesting that they've found themselves in that situation. Now, for the Boy Scouts have been having financial difficulties. Is that right?
Well, that doesn't sound off. Yeah, but then again, there are, as far as I can tell, they're government run. I think. I don't think it's a private organization.
I have a feeling maybe not non-profit, but I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's government funding.
Non-profit. They're usually kind of connected, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I have a feeling there may be some government funding.
Yeah, right. But I could probably do some research on that and come back to you some other time. We're doing this off the cuff, as you know. So
yes, exactly. That's right. Also, too, it is Father's Day in Australia today. So, yep. So, happy Father's Day to all the Aussie fathers. I actually don't know when it's Father's Day in New Zealand. Apologies, but here in Australia it is Father's Day. And bit of an anecdote. When I lived in North America, the difference in Father's Day was actually a bit of a pain because I had to plan months ahead to get a card for my father, right?
Sure.
Because by the time it rolled around in Australia, there were no cards, Father's Day cards in North America, so available to me. So I had to remember to buy a card in North American Father's Day and then keep it for anyway.
Right.
And I'm bad at sending cards at the best of times. So.
Well, that's the same with me. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the routine itself that kind of, makes me kind of conveniently forget about it.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Yes. So I'm just having a look through at other articles and see what we've got here. We've got a few things, of course.
Yeah, sure. We've got a bit more time.
Yeah, diversity and identity politics, of course, have come up here we go, documentary. So one of the things we do on Wiki4Men is we track different, the aim is to track events as well as documenting things like intimate partner violence and so forth and other issues. We also talk about events as they're happening. And one of the things we do is we're actually tracking documentaries, and it's actually quite interesting. There are a reasonable number of documentaries coming up now, actually, about issues that will be of interest to men's rights and anti-feminism. Obviously, The Red Pill is the canonical. That's Cassie Jay's documentary from 2016. That I think has absolutely been a game changer. A lot of the other documentaries that I've got on the list in Wiki4Men are not as sort of professionally made. That's a professional documentary. A lot of them are amateur made, but they're still, in many cases, absolutely fantastic. So there's so many actually that there are quite a number of them that I haven't seen yet actually. Right. So we've got Martyrs of Marriage actually. So the author or the producer of Martyrs of Marriage, Topeka Bardwaj, was actually at ICMI 17 and presented Martyrs of Marriage. And I've kept in touch with Topeka actually over the years since then. And anyway, so she's got Martyrs of Marriage is about problems that men face, a very Indian-specific problem concerning dowry laws. Yeah, it's actually really interesting to look at it from a Western perspective too, to see that in India and other countries, there are these problems that we just don't have, that are quite culturally specific. And she's got another documentary, India's Sons. Now, I don't know much about the documentary yet, but that's either coming out soon or has just come out. But there are all sorts of other ones. One I saw again recently, and I recommend to people, and you can find it on Wiki4Men, is No Woman, No Crime. And Vernon, I was just going to chat about this documentary, but jump in. Feel free to jump in if you want, at any time. So No Woman, No Crime is a documentary actually made by Russia Today, and this was made a few years ago, and it's about the biases against men in Israel. So many people in the English-speaking world think that the problems we see are limited to the English-speaking world, and that couldn't be further from the truth. There are a number of countries where men are facing quite serious problems. Spain is one where the family courts are I know this would amaze a lot of people, actually worse than a lot of English-speaking countries. They destroy men. Well, ours do too, but they even go beyond. It's absolutely extraordinary. Israel's another one where men are having quite serious problems. So No Woman, No Crime is about women who have been either committed domestic or interpartner violence against their male partners, or just in some cases other men. And the Israeli police are just not willing to prosecute or pursue these women, and they're really really being quite. The police will often be very chivalrous, which unfortunately is a problem. Police overall, I think, male police tend to be quite chivalrous towards women. I saw that myself when I was in the police. Mm-hmm. But I think it's gone next level in Israel. So No Woman, No Crime it's only a short documentary, about 22 minutes. Well worth a watch. There was one Israeli taxi driver, for example, where he most likely would have gone to jail were it not for the fact that he was recording his cab all the time. And when she made the series of false accusations against him that he'd sexually assaulted her and whatnot, that he was able to then show the video footage and show that it was completely false. Otherwise, she would simply have been believed. And this is, quite a common problem. There's also a problem in Israel that now I just see there's a gentleman. See if I can remember the gentleman's. I've got the gentleman's name here. May not. Yes, I do have his name, and I am going to mention it. So he's done nothing wrong. He is last I checked, he's still stuck in Israel. So what happens is in many countries will put, now the US is famous for putting men in jail if they fail to pay, or if they get behind on child support. Now it's interesting that, or it's notable that women in general, and so this is true in the US and I believe it's true elsewhere, women in general have a higher delinquency rate on child support payments than men do. Mm-hmm. But the law is virtually never enforced when it comes to women. Those two things are probably related too, because they never actually push the women, and so they probably end up with a higher delinquency rate. So anyway, men in the US, of course, go to jail if they get far enough behind, which I find to be absolutely extraordinary. How's someone going to pay child support if they're prevented from earning a living anyway?
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. They almost don't. I would chance that they don't care. They just want them in jail.
Right, exactly. It's got to be something like that, because that is not going to sort the problem out. In Australia, Australia will, like a lot of countries, will refuse to let men exit. And I say men specifically because, again, I don't believe this has ever been done to women who are delinquent. But they will refuse men the opportunity to leave Australia if they're behind in child support. They'll put a stop order on at the border. And Australia is very strict on exit and on immigration going in and out. And as a result, everyone has to show their passport going out, and so they do catch people. But anyway, Israel has taken this next level. The Israelis will assess child support years ahead and then make that payable immediately, and then refuse to let the man leave Israel unless he pays years of child support ahead. Now, one problem here is they do this to Israeli men, okay, but at least they can earn a living. They do it to foreign men, so without giving them a right to work. So there's thought to be hundreds of men stuck in Israel who can't leave the country and who have no right to work because they're foreigners. So they're working illegally, which is usually hand-to-mouth, low pay, and they're never going to be able to pay that money back. Now, there's a gentleman, an Australian Israeli, I think he may be dual citizen. He's in Australia. Sorry, his name is Noam Huppert, Huppert. We're actually friends on Facebook. Okay. And anyway, it's absolutely extraordinary. He's in Israel for 8,000 years.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. It actually says, and they said it's 99. So they worked out how much money he should pay, and they worked out it will take him, 8,000 years to pay it. And it's 99. On the form he showed it. It says the year he's free is 9999. The only reason it's that is because that's the highest number that the system would display.
Wow.
Yep. So just a little under 8,000 years. Yeah. And as far as I know, the problem still hasn't been sorted out. But as of a few weeks ago when I last looked at this, he was still stuck in Israel. So anyway, yeah, a documentary's been done on that as well. A short documentary called No.
So is this by accident?
No. It's not. They've assessed. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's a correct determination in their system about how long he should be in it. He has to stay because they've decided that he has to pay that amount of. It's 3 million shekalim or so. It's some absolutely huge sum. So the poor guy is stuck there. So I'm going to check in again, but as of a few weeks ago, he was still stuck in Israel. Yeah, wanting to return to Australia.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, this is an absolutely extraordinary. His is the extreme example, but it's an absolutely extraordinary situation. These men, so it's thought to be hundreds of men at least who are stuck in Israel and can't leave because of this pre-assessment of future payments. That, as far as I know, Israel is the only country that does that.
Wow. And, we wonder why we support them so much.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, Israel's a contentious topic politically, but as a functioning state, it's got its warts like all others. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So there it is. So poor old Noam. As I said, I would check in and see what the situation is. But the last time I checked in a few weeks ago, he was still stuck in Israel.
Would he be interested in coming on our show?
He may well be interested in coming on our show, actually. I'll reach out to him. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully the time zone differential isn't terrible.
Yeah, well, that's right. You're in the US. I'm in Australia. Israel. We could work something out. We do our show on the weekends. I don't mind staying up late if it works out. So yeah, we'll see what we can work out.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, we did feel like that during ICMI, didn't we?
Oh yeah.
We had people in three very different time zones.
Yeah, we were put through the grinder to be sure. Yeah, it was just nonstop work almost.
It was so the last one, ICMI 21. Well, it was 24 hours a day continuously for 6 days, and there were 3 teams in the UK, the United States, and Australia, and we were just going follow the sun all the way through. We'd do our 8 hours, hand over to the next team, then they'd hand over and be back to us 6 days. Yes.
Right. Now, the downside of that is that we can't, it's really hard to kind of do anything together, but we managed. I actually was able to fill in for Robert's co-host at one point, and that's where we found out we hit it off.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, no, as I said, I might as well, tell everybody. I said when you were looking at joining Voice for Men, I said to one in chat groups that you reminded me of me, except younger and with more hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You've already heard that before, but yeah.
I know.
Yeah, that's actually what I said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to inject the youth back into the men's movements.
That's right, exactly. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'm getting a little thin on top there. So.
Right.
I come from a family of balding men, and so I decided if I made it to 30 with my hair intact, that's all I required. I made it to 30, and then I started to thin, so I don't care.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The hair on my dad's side, they don't tend to be balding in that way. Kind of. I think even my dad's in his 70s, and he's still, it's not like he had his full head of hair, but he's still, more pretty presentable, I suppose. And that's a terrible thing to say, presentable, but as far as the men on my mother's side, I think some of them went bald, but clearly, I'm in my early 30s right now, and I'm not showing it yet. So
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yes. And when if you do, just wear a hat. That's the one change. That's the one change I had to make. If you're going outside for a long time, a hat is essential.
Yeah, it'll especially suck if I start to bald the way that other Japanese people do, because it's really the hair the hair is really on the blackish side, and it's and they kind of comb it in the way that there's like a very, very irreverent slang for these kind of people. They call them barcode heads.
Okay, I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but yeah. So if I ever do start balding, hat for sure. It'll be a normal occurrence, or bandana. Who knows?
Very good.
Yeah.
So I'm looking through. Income splitting has come up. That's a bit of a random topic, isn't it?
What is it you said?
Income splitting has come up. That's a bit of a random. So it's pretty interesting. So the income splitting is the idea that spouses are treated as one unit for taxation purposes. So probably give you a bit of context there. It's related to taxation, and certainly in Australia, decades ago, the taxes used to be levied. A couple would, as I understand it, would just file one tax return, and it would be joint income. And the interesting thing about that is with tax bans, it means that the income is combined, and so the second person effectively is put on top of the first person in terms of the taxation calculation, and as a result may end up paying proportionally more tax. And the argument is that this system encourages one spouse to stay home and not work. Right. And because of the effectively financial penalty. And feminists have pointed out that this would almost certainly be women. And so feminists have generally been against income splitting, because in Canada, when I was living there, the government seriously considered restoring it. This is in 2005. Mm-hmm. And they got a huge pushback from feminists on this, because they said it would keep women out of the workforce. Because as we know, as far as feminists are concerned, the most important thing is the women should work for some reason.
Okay. Well, the man could stop working.
Exactly, that's right. But they argue that it would, and probably would mostly be women. But I'd be quite great. I'd quite happily spend a bit of time not working. I'd feel fully employed. Right. So they got a huge pushback from the feminists, actually, interestingly, on that. And in the end, they did sort of implement a few changes, but it was interesting that the main feminist organisations were against income splitting. So yes, but anyway, so that's I find it really interesting that how these things sort of end up reflecting in different societies. I mean, in France, of course, they have very, very cheap. It's not to do with income splitting, but they have very, very cheap childcare. I think it's $1 a day or something, subsidised by the government. So effectively, women, economically, women are encouraged to go back to work versus look after their children. Now, my view is, I don't really care if it's the father or the mother, but I think children are better off with, if possible, better off with their own parent, one of their own parents if they can be. It's not always financially viable, but that's certainly my preference. And I don't say it should be the mother. It could be maybe the father will be the one who'll stay home.
Right.
Rather than being brought up by strangers. But as it isn't always possible to do otherwise.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is where I want to bring back up the idea of extended families, right? Because I've mentioned this in AVFM. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show before, but but basically the idea that the family should not only just be nuclear, but more than that. It should be generational and pretty ongoing, I think. Because that way, maybe the parents can work, but the grandparents will be involved. They aren't going to be strangers,
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So because that's the way my family's kind of been doing this. Because when my brother had his son, for a short while they were living here in this house, and and a lot of my brother worked, and his wife went to school and had work of her own, and in the meantime, the children were under my their grandparents, my parents' care, and things kind of worked out. And even after they moved out and got their own place, they still bring over the kids. Sometimes.
I love that solution. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's still it's a member of the family. That's right. He's looking after them and not strangers. That's fabulous. I must admit, I come from the cultural background here has very much been nuclear family for a few generations.
Right.
If we look back in the West 2 generations earlier, there were extended families, but it's really fallen away in Western countries, and I do think there's really something to be said for that. Right. I once read, so fathers are a lot more involved in child rearing now than in Western countries than a few generations ago in terms of, say, changing diapers and all that sort of thing. But I once read a study that showed that, and this was a US study, a woman who gave birth in the 19th century, they worked out, had an average of 5 women who were available to assist with the baby, right? So it was the mother and the grandmother and the sister and maybe an older child. There were 5 women on average who were able to look after the child, take that load off the mother. So the fathers didn't have to, do the equivalent 19th century equivalent of changing diapers, or bathing the child and so forth. Because people have often been critical of men in the past not being that involved with that sort of process. But they made the point that the men didn't need to. They were out working. They were doing other stuff. There were enough women there dealing with it that the men didn't have to be involved. But by the late 20th century, this had stopped. The women had largely fallen away, smaller families. The extended family was largely gone, replaced by the nuclear family and so forth. The number of women who were available to help the mother had dropped to 0, right, or close to 0. And the father essentially had to step up and jump in and be more active in terms of bathing and diaper changing and all that sort of stuff. So I find that really interesting. Actually, in the 19th century, there were all these women who could just take the baby while the mother needs to have a sleep, and deal with the baby, and the baby's fine. So I find that really interesting, actually, and that's a major change, and the extended family would start to bring that back in again.
Exactly. Now, if you're a farming family, then your family is going to be bigger, right? That's just kind of the way it is. But I think even city families could take some lessons from that one. I guess the deterrent is the resources to actually raise up such children, but that's only if the children are just kind of going to hang out, be cared for, and then left sent on their way. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's like they're as involved as they'd be as involved as anyone. I'm not talking hard labor necessarily, but I'm saying that a family could be continually invested in each other for generations and generations. So I wish that angle would be touched on more by the pro-family side of things, because they're always talking about nuclear family this and nuclear family that, as if that's the end all be all. But that's just what it is, the nucleus. Like there's got to be some more layers to that nucleus. No,
that's a really good point, actually. It's interesting. It's something we don't really think about much in the West anymore in terms of having larger families again, or having more people living in the same house again. So that said, I think there's a lot to be said for it, and I wouldn't be at all unhappy if Western civilization started to move back towards that a little bit more.
Sure, and it would probably, I would guess that it would resolve the mental health crisis for the elderly. Exactly, because the lack of the kids are gone, and they're maybe on some other part of the country or something like that, and it's rare that they get visits, so they become kind of isolated, and I think that has some damaging effects on the brain. For my own channel, I've talked with Hannah Wallen of Honey Badger Radio, and she talked about this quite a bit. And even in these nursing home situations, or these situations in which the elderly are given care by nurses and such, they're not treated as human so much, and therefore they don't respond in a social way. They are unable to do so. But if you start treating them like a human being, this starts to get restored. So I think we can solve a lot of this by keeping socially busy the minds of the elderly, because my parents are in their 70s and they're not slowing down at all, because they're always involved with the rest of the family's lives and everything. So right,
there's an interesting parallel with the babies there. We were talking before about babies essentially being cared for by strangers, and how we have the elderly being cared for by strangers, and it doesn't seem to work very well in either situation, does it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, the case of babies is not always possible to do otherwise, but in the case of elderly, I think that whenever possible, I think it would be good to have them close with the rest of the family. As you say, they can help with children, but also they have more social contact as well.
Exactly.
So we're coming up at about an hour and a quarter.
Yeah.
I've been clicking through random articles because we have lots of fun stuff on Wiki4Men, and one of them that's come up amused me. So I think I actually put this article in, so I shouldn't be surprised it's there. You ready? It's a completely different topic to the one we were just talking about.
Okay.
It is the Icelandic Phallological Museum. It's a penis museum in Iceland.
Yeah.
Yep.
Phallological?
The Icelandic Phallological, Phallolo Logical Museum in Iceland.
There it is.
Yes. And it's a museum dedicated to penises in Iceland.
Cool.
So one day I'm going to go to Iceland. I regret not going to Iceland when I lived in Canada, because it was a lot closer, but I didn't get there.
Right.
There's a few things I'm going to do when I get to Iceland, and one is go to that power station. And I don't know if you know, there's a large thermal pool in Iceland. It's the output of it's the overflow heat from a power station,
right.
From a geothermal power station. And I would definitely want to go in there. And the other thing I'm going to see is the Icelandic Phallological Museum. It's probably in Reykjavik, because I'm sure everything's in Reykjavik. So sorry. Anyway, so there's also a vagina museum, by the way, not to be outdone. There is a vagina museum in London, and they both have articles on Wiki4Men.
Yep. I noticed that the vagina museum is much more info in there.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So I think I wrote both articles, actually. So I probably should get back and provide more info to the Phallological Museum, actually.
Right. Well, there is a link to the museum's website. So
yes, but it's interesting. Now these are both serious institutions,
mm-hmm.
and I would suggest both have probably got it's probably interesting things, interesting exhibits. So, but I just thought it was amusing that it did come up in my random search. So.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm looking through the website right now. There's this bar pit tap, and it's not only are the levers phallic, but the beer names: Phallic Lager, Moby Dick.
Oh yes, Moby Dick.
The cock ale. These punning on these things. They're having too much fun with this. But
that's great. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try a Moby Dick when I go there. Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
Sure. Well, I think it's worth mentioning that there in places like Japan, there is penis festival. Right.
Actually, yeah, I've read about this a little bit. We've talked about it a little bit of Voice4Men. Do you want to quickly run through? Could you explain the penis festival to me, please?
Oh, okay. So this is just basically what I know myself. I've never been when I was living in Japan. It's just more of a recent discovery for me. Thanks to my involvement in the men's movement. But it's just a time, I can't tell you the date, I don't remember, in which we celebrate things that are penis, really. And there's like candies that are shaped like that, and there's like a lot of exhibits, statues, that kind of thing. Like there's a lot of stuff. In fact, I have zero idea if this relates to Penis Festival, but a family friend of ours showed us a little kind of a small, like a small gadget thing, not a gadget, but like a little souvenir kind of thing in which you could pull a lever and a penis would like pop right out, like from a box or something like that. You know, it's meant to be in good fun, and it's like,
Yeah,
and if anything, it's said to
that's
be
good.
like a symbol of male vitality. So it's always in this positive light.
So it's a positive light. That's great. That's
Mm,
fabulous. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah,
So I think this is worth more research on my part, maybe more study. You know, I wish I can kind of go to Japan because we haven't been able to go to Japan since we moved here.
yeah.
So yeah, lots of stuff to look at in the Asian perspective, not just India. It's just there's a lot to study between Japan, South Korea, and everything. You know, I'm sure we're missing a lot of things.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, like I was saying before, there's a lot of different issues, men's issues in different countries as well, whether it's the draft or various other issues or circumcision in certain countries and so forth. There are quite a few country-specific issues, and it is worth researching them, actually. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned this on any of our episodes before, but this is something that I do want to talk about more in the future. There's a very serious problem of slavery of men in Southeast Asia, actually. I think I may have mentioned it, but
You mentioned it, yeah, right.
yeah, that's
Not in
right. Yeah,
detail.
that's right. So essentially, they trick guys from some of the poorer countries like Laos to go to Thailand for work, and then they will either bond them into debt slavery or just trick them and throw them on the boat, chain them to a boat, and the fishing boat will head out to sea, and the fishing boats stay at sea for several years, and they're refueled from the shore and resupplied from the shore. So, and I think I did mention they were actually there was one particular report I was about a guy who escaped, and he said that when the mothership turned up to take off the catch and to resupply, he was chained to the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, so he couldn't get onto the other ship and try to get back to shore. Bear in mind, he'd still have to get onto the other ship, evade detection, and get all the way back to shore. But they used to chain him to the deck while the two ships were docked at sea. And he didn't see land for years there. So that's a good example of the type of country-specific problem. That's a region-specific problem of Southeast Asia, but particularly countries like Laos and Vietnam and so forth. So are seeing this problem. Anyway, yes, it's something that there's so many issues. And on my list of things I want to address and talk about is just huge, and some of these I don't get to for a long period of time, but we'll keep working, keep tapping away at it all.
Yeah, we will, to be sure.
Yeah,
it's always the women's issues that are given kind of top billing and make for like the biggest sob stories, so to speak. Not saying that they're like trivial matters that are overinflated. I'm just saying they're the only matters that get attention usually. Like, oftentimes I would see videos about, North Korean defectors and stuff like that, and what life is like over there in North Korea and such, like I've been doing kind of recently in the past few days. And a lot of it is testimonies from women and how the women have had it bad and stuff like that, but it's not nearly enough of the men, or they're not really given as much consideration. And I'd be more interested in hearing, male specific issues, but it's not that they don't exist. It's just that they're not really spoken about because they're not expected to.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is unfortunately a phenomenon we see all around the world, actually. Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on an hour and a half, aren't we?
Yeah, I think. I honestly think this is good. So.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good logical point to stop.
Yep.
So thanks again, Vernon. It's been another good episode, I think. So
absolutely
touched on quite a few different topics. Let's talk again soon.
Yeah, sure. All right. See you then, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.